welcome to a special edition of the Earthborne Games podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Fischer. Well, Anders, our normal host, is out today, so I guess in his stead, I'll go by Anders Fischer today. And we've got a lot of people to introduce. First off, some of the usual suspects. Joining me today is Andrew Navarro.
Hello.
How you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great. We're on day 2 of the Gamefound campaign. I have a cup of coffee. It's 7 p.m. So everything's perfect.
You're not with your normal background. Normally you have like gorgeous warm weather behind you, and everybody in the Discord is like jealous of it.
Yeah, well, I just have a frond and some plastic butterflies. But yeah, if I was outside right now, I'd be eaten alive.
Oh, it's mosquito time?
Oh, it is definitely mosquito time.
Well, we don't have to worry about that here in Minnesota, because with me in the cold is Evan Simonette. Hey, Evan.
I don't know. It's going to be like 40 degrees, though, which is pretty strange for January.
Yeah, those mosquitoes will start hatching.
Yeah, exactly.
No kidding. Last week we were like below 0, so I'm kind of okay with getting away from that.
Totally.
All right. Well, those are our usual suspects. So then I'm going to introduce our special guests today. We have 2 of them. First up is somebody we all used to work with at Fantasy Flight Games, and has been helping out with some of the design and development on Legacy of the Ancestors, Luke Eddy.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. It's kind of it's true. Many of us did work together. In fact,
yeah. What did you do back at FFG, Luke?
Well, Evan and I actually worked pretty closely. Evan was like my main man for Star Wars Legion graphic design.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was on. I was in.
That's awesome.
Just constant, tiny Star Wars miniatures being made. Yeah, so I did that at Fantasy Flight, and then since then, I can't get away from tiny plastic miniatures because I'm doing some work for WizKids doing the D&D Onslaught. But I've always kind of been a card game guy, despite working on minis games. So it was great to work on Earthborne Rangers.
Yeah, we were happy to have you. So when we kind of get to the Legacy of the Ancestors section, we'll kind of be grilling you about all the stuff you did on there. But with that, we'll introduce our other guest today. He has been an active member in the community, so a lot of you have known and spoken with him, and he has been working on the Stewards of the Valley Ranger cards. We have Davi Paulino.
Hi, happy to be here.
So yeah, a lot of people will know you from the Discord, Davi. Mm-hmm. How did you come to, like, I don't know, find Earthborne and end up working with us?
Yeah, I was about to be like, and I don't have anything to say, really. I like games, but I really like games, and I really liked Earthborne. I think starting off was pretty much just like anyone. I saw the Kickstarter. I was like, oh, this looks really cool. I still remember, and I've told Evan this, the Rings of the Moon. Is that what it's still called? Mm-hmm. But that art piece with the rings like really got me, and I'm like, wow, this looks really cool. And so got into it, volunteered to be a playtester, did some aggressive bothering of Fischer during the playtest that caught his attention, I think. So yeah, after that, just started getting more involved. I think, like a lot of people out there, I really believe in the game, the mission, and everything that Earthborne Games is doing. So I'm extremely happy to be a part of it. So yeah.
Well, we're glad that you've become a part of it too. I think
thank you.
you are one of a tradition of people we have in our community of like, what is the phrase you used? Very like persistent people, but like in very like positive kind of engaging, fun ways. Because, like, naturally the person we always give crap to on the podcast is Chub Frog, who is just like the rules lawyer extraordinaire when it comes to Earthborne Rangers. And, like, it's funny. I part of the reason I hesitated calling him a rules lawyer is because, like, that's usually kind of used as this negative connotation, but he loves the game and, like, is so positive and, like, is, like, picking it apart, trying to better understand it, and, like, I don't know, he dives into all of the minutia, but in this way that's, like, very fun, engaging, and positive. And I think it's very similar to the stuff you did back in the day on playtesting that kind of got us chatting in the first place. So I appreciate all of you out there who are constantly diving into the game, but in kind of a positive, with the positive vibes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And is he answering some questions on the Gamefound comments section too? Chubfrog?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But before the campaign started, actually, like, Corey and I weren't in there as much before we clicked launch. And at one point, like, somebody asked a question. It was like, could somebody from Earthborne, like Chubfrog or one of the Andrews, answer this question for me? And then Chubfrog was like, just want to clarify, not in any way associated with Earthborne, just very enthusiastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, like, there's been several people in the comments who've, I think, this time around, having the support of so many knowledgeable players during the campaign takes an immense amount of pressure off. It's so great. So really, really, really grateful for, well, grateful for you, Fischer, and Corey for going in there and wading through the comment section. I've been on Discord duty, which is the safest place in the world. So I really appreciate that. But also that everyone else is in there talking to people. I think, compared to last time, where I felt like we were answering a lot of questions and the same questions over and over again, and, like, I don't know, I felt like we got a lot more, I don't know, maybe intense criticism at the beginning of the last one. This one, there's been some criticism and some of those same things that come up, but, like, the amount of people who show up to discuss it and know what they're talking about is amazing.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I think having the game out helps a lot. Like, back then we were trying to kind of prove this thing that didn't exist is cool.
Right.
Whereas now, like, there's a bunch, all these people can, like, point to it and, like, have all this reference material. And, well, we certainly have a decent amount of reference material this time around too. It's nice to have a bunch of YouTube reviews and stuff you can point to.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, I guess let's talk about the Gamefound. So for normal listeners of the podcast, I'm sure we'll have quite a few new listeners this time from new people who we've brought in through this new campaign. But for regular listeners, we're going to kind of do a bit of a different structure so that we can kind of talk a lot about the stuff Davi and Luke have worked on and really highlight that, and just talk about the Gamefound and help answer any questions you have. So not going to do our normal work stories and stuff we're into this time, but we're going to dive right into talking about the Gamefound. So, Andrew, you talked a little bit earlier, but do you want to talk about how it's going?
Sure. Yeah, I'm in the process right now, as we were talking, of closing things on my computer, because I've had this computer open for so long and have not, like, reset it. And I've been working on gigantic image files for the Gamefound for these last couple weeks. So it's chugging a little bit. But it's all worth it. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, as right now, let's see, as of this recording, what are we sitting at?
We're at 436.
436. Like,
so just we're like what? Like $10,000 short of crossing what we made last time?
Yeah, well, I think we're $18,000 off of what we made the entire campaign last time. Wow. Which is like, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And it's interesting because, like, yesterday, Rachel was asking me, like, how do you feel? Do you feel, like, relieved? Do you feel less stressed? I'm like, no, not really. Not right now. I guess I don't. But this morning I woke up, I felt a lot better.
Okay, good.
I felt like it was kind of the like what I imagine someone who would run a marathon might feel at the end, where they get to the finish line. They've been like working their ass off for the last several hours. Just replace several hours with like weeks for me on the Gamefound. Get to the end, just collapse. Like, are you happy? Yeah, that's a great feeling. So yesterday I was a bit tired, but today is I've been feeling really good. So yeah, it's amazing. I think I have a very different perspective on everything this time around. Just knowing like how, like where all the money goes and how it all works. Like it's like I feel like my mind is just working differently, like seeing all this happen. But it's amazing. It's I think Darren asked a question later on that I think speaks to this perfectly. But it definitely feels incredibly gratifying, not only to have people who already own the game and clearly enjoy the game come back to get more stuff, but then also get a bunch of new people on board. I think we're about 50-50 for what it looks like with returning backers and new ones, and I think that's fantastic. I think it's a great sign, and it makes me very excited, and I can't wait to deliver this. I feel like re-energized to see it over the finish line because we're so close.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see a bunch of new people kind of come in. We always knew that like this kind of reprint campaign, because there's a lot of people who don't want to back something that's, you know, when we first did that first campaign, like the game, what did our track say of how much of it actually even existed when we first? It was like our little remember?
Oh yeah,
made that
little progress,
little rangers.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't even remember where we put those initially, but the game was like less than half done, right?
Yes.
And so there's a lot of people who don't want to jump in until it's kind of tried and true. And now that we kind of have that, and people can come in, it's super exciting.
Yeah, I thought about asking Evan to do a new graphic that just essentially showed like all the little rangers like pretty much right there at the finish line.
Yeah.
This time around. But it didn't seem necessary.
But yeah, so for this first segment, we're going to just there have been a lot of questions coming in about the Gamefound. We've got an FAQ page on there, but we wanted to quick rattle off and talk about some of them because here, discussing it a bit more, we can give a little more context. So we're going to roll through some of those FAQs and stuff. Andrew, I'll cue you up, and then you can kind of answer, and then we'll get some more interesting conversation for the rest of you guys here.
Are we want to take turns reading FAQs?
Sure.
Like we're in a classroom reading out of a book together.
Yeah. We can pass the Gamefound FAQs around.
that sounds great.
Good. Evan, I'm passing the first Gamefound FAQ to you. Do you want to ask it?
Sure. All right. How many copies of Ranger cards come in each product? So if I have a core set and a card doubler, how many expansions do I need to have a full two-player, or have two full play sets of everything? How many copies of the errata pack do I need?
Sounds like a word problem.
If two errata packs are leaving approaching Chicago, one's going 30 miles an hour.
Yes, exactly. The answer is 5. So yeah, I can see why this might be a little bit confusing. So core game, there's one full play set of cards, and a full play set is two copies each of 2 copies of each individual card. So in the core game, you get a full set. In the doubler, you get 1 full set. So that's how the doubler works. It doubles the things. In the Stewards of the Valley, there's also just 1 full play set. But in Legacy of the Ancestors, there's 2 full play sets. So you'll get 4 copies of each Ranger card in the campaign expansion. And that's how we're going to be doing our campaign expansions going forward as well. So we'll never have to do like a doubler product for campaign expansion, and you'll never have to buy 2 campaign expansions to get 2 full play sets. As far as how many copies of the errata pack do you need for Ranger cards, that is still a little bit up in the air. Right now, I think the only card we have, Ranger card we have in there officially, is the Guardian roll. So if it remains that way, where we just have the Guardian roll in there and that's it, we'll probably just give you 2 copies of it, and then you won't need to get another one. But there are some other cards that we kind of have on the fence as to whether or not we're going to put them in there. We'll make sure to let everyone know before the Pledge Manager closes exactly what's in that pack, and then you can make your own decision.
Yeah, I've been telling everybody to order 2 to be safe, but we just don't know right now.
Exactly.
All right, Davi, do you want to ask the next one?
Yes, I can do that. I'm assuming once again to Andrew. What miniature sets do I need to buy to have a complete set if I have the 4 from the first Kickstarter? When can I see sculpts of the others?
Great questions, both. Thank you, Davi. I would. So there's 4 different minis sets in there. Minis Series 1. That's the one from the first campaign. So if you got the minis in the first campaign, and you want the rest of them, you just need numbers 2, 3, and 4. As for when you can see the sculpts, I was hoping to have a couple before we launched, but I just got too busy doing other things. But we're working with the same manufacturer and sculptors we did last time. So we were working with CMA in the UK again to sculpt and produce these out of reclaimed pewter. They're on board. I was chatting with Louis over there a couple days ago. He's out of town. We're going to meet and talk about it soon. But so they're on board. We're going to be working with them to be this exact same quality. So it'll be in the same basic styles. So you can kind of imagine what they'll look like. But as they come in, we'll update the Pledge Manager, and we'll also send out updates once we have images of those for you to see. But that'll all happen before the Pledge Manager closes. So if you're on the fence and don't want to commit without seeing them, that's fine. You'll get a chance to see them and to get them before the Pledge Manager closes.
All right, next up, Luke.
Yeah, I have a perennial board gamer conundrum question, which is, what sort of storage solution do you recommend if I've sleeved everything?
Well, what's that thing that you have, Fischer? Is that like a Gamegenic box?
Yeah, so I have I have a couple different Gamegenic boxes. It's pretty good, but I'm gonna run out of space before we're done with expansions.
Yeah, there's so Team Covenant just started carrying these really cool looking
that's sleek
boxes.
Yeah, the bulk box.
The bulk box. Yeah, and they are
Those
like,
are on a shelf.
Oh, do you?
Let's
Right
see.
nice.
They fit perfectly in a calyx square, the 3 of them.
Yeah, I think that's what I would recommend. They look really sturdy. They're sustainably made. They're made by a company in the UK, but I think these ones, the ones that Covenant makes, I think they're made in the US. So whether you are in Europe or the US, you should be able to get these bulk boxes. And yeah, they look really nice. So I'd recommend those.
All right, Evan, you're next.
All right. Will my preferred language be offering the expansions or add-ons from this campaign?
That is also a good question. So Legacy of the Ancestors is a lock for everybody. So everyone's already gotten on board with that. So you can count on Legacy of the Ancestors coming for sure. We have interest for everything else, but none of those deals are done yet. But I don't see any issues with it. I mean, we'll see, but we're really just going to wait until we're done with the campaign, and then we'll figure out exactly who all is doing what. As far as the errata packs go in other languages, That's a more interesting question, just because the errata in other languages might be different than ours. So it's not necessarily a 1-to-1. So I think if the partners want to do an errata pack, they'll probably need to tailor it to their own edition, just to cover anything that they may have screwed up in the localization. But obviously they're welcome to do it.
I think we've already seen Frosted did some stickers or something already for the German edition.
Yep.
So just chat with you're in the studio who's handling your language's version. Just talk with them about any of that stuff.
Yeah, and just I think too, like, just for people who have the other language editions, I don't know how many of you all listen to this podcast, but just know that they're doing the best they can to work with us, who are a very, very small publisher, who have a lot of balls in the air. So we're not always as coordinated as we could possibly be. Like, even when we worked at Asmodee, it was really, really hard to coordinate between all of the various publishing partners, and we were all one company. So it's a very challenging thing to do. So if you haven't heard anything about a particular product yet, like, don't harass them. Just to ask them politely. To tell them politely that you're interested, and they'll do their best to get it.
All right, Davi.
Okay. Next question is, will you be using VFI to handle fulfillment in Asia? And also, what is VFI?
They are a fulfillment company. And the answer is yes.
Hey, easy.
Nice.
Luke.
All right, that was an easy one. Okay. Errata. Do I need an errata pack? And what about errata to the campaign guide and the rules?
I always find the questions like, do I need? I always want to say no. You never need anything.
Maybe the question is, what's in it? Because that's a good point.
I think part of this might be my hasty rephrasing of several questions we've gotten. But a lot of people have asked, like, oh, if I have this version of the game, do I need the errata pack, right?
Yeah.
And so the answer is, anybody who is getting the game out of this campaign, this is the second printing, and all of that errata is integrated already. You do not need the errata pack because all of that stuff is already updated.
Yes.
The errata pack is only for people who own the first printing of either the core set or the doubler. And you own the first printing if you backed the original Kickstarter and got that copy, or if you have picked it up at retail since then. Or honestly, pick it up at retail in the next 12 months.
Yes. There's a few more out there.
Yeah. So until this hits the stores, everything you buy up until then, and then there's probably a few first printings out there, will need that errata pack. So, not to Andrew's point, need. It might improve your experience to have an errata pack.
Right. And it's just cards. So I've had lots of people ask about the campaign guide and the rule book. Printing the campaign guide and the rule book, I feel like, I know it would really just balloon the price of that errata pack to such a degree where it effectively becomes like a full-fledged product. And I feel like the rules and the campaign guide work just as well as something you can download and print yourself. So if you want to have physical versions of both of those things, the updated PDFs will be on our website. And if you don't want to use it, then there's the Living Valley. Yeah.
Yes, there's also the Living Valley, which we keep fully up to date.
Yes, and for those of you who don't know what the Living Valley is our living rules and campaign guide where it will always be updated with any changes we make, even after. I want to say that the second printing is going to be perfect, but we are human after all. It'll have, but so if there's anything that comes up,
Frog has found everything.
Surely, right? Well, if we keep getting more and more people will play, and then it's the more eyes get on a thing, the more things are found. So, if there's any changes down the road, we'll update the rules and the campaign guide on the rules and the campaign guide on the Living Valley, so you'll always have something that's up to date.
Cool. All right, Evan, you're next.
Yeah, I feel like I need to read this in like a Seinfeld voice or something.
I was going to say.
The deal.
Exactly what I was thinking.
What's the deal with the card doubler? Do I need it?
I mean, it's like
Doubles? Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything.
doubles the cards. So the card doubler is, I was just talking about on the Discord today. The card doubler does exactly what it says on the box. Every Ranger card, except for the maladies, we didn't give you double maladies. We didn't feel like you needed double maladies. Every Ranger card that is in the core game, it's just those cards again. So that you will then have 2 full play sets. And whether or not you need it is totally up to you. If you're someone who likes to build decks and keep them together and not, have to disassemble anything or move cards, you have a card you really like, and you're like, oh, it'd be great in this deck and in this deck. With a doubler, you'd be able to have both those decks built simultaneously. It's also good for larger play groups, for 3 to 4 player groups, so that players 3 and 4 aren't stuck with the leftovers after everyone else has built their decks. Gives a lot more flexibility to those larger groups. And it's also good, I've heard, for running multiple campaigns and being able to compartmentalize your Ranger deck and the rewards and all those things from one campaign to the next. You can kind of have 2 concurrent campaigns going if you want to silo those cards. So it has a lot of utility. It also opens up a lot more options for the vendors inside the game who offer you cards from the starting sets. So there's a lot of benefits to it, but really it's going to come down to the individual player. I would say if you're playing solo, you probably definitely don't need it, but anything above that, think about it. Think about those things and see if that speaks to you. And if it does, then go for it.
Yeah, I usually say it's nice at 2 players, and I recommend it for 3 or 4.
There you go.
It's a nice
It's
box,
much more
too.
concise. I give it the long-winded version every time.
No,
Evan
that
wants
was
you to buy
actually
it just for the box.
It's a nice
That's true.
box.
The box is really pretty. All right, Davi, you're up next.
Okay, yeah. Next question is, will there be late pledges, and what is available in the Pledge Manager?
The answer is yes, there will be late pledges. The answer is everything will be available in the Pledge Manager. The only difference is that I think the discounts might not be as good. So first time around, we did a pre-order store after our first campaign on Backer Kit, which is effectively like a late pledge. Everything was available there, but the discounts were, I think we did 10% off of all of the card-based products instead of 20, which is what we're doing right now for the most part. So yeah, that'll be the difference, is that the Pledge Manager things will probably just get a little bit more expensive, but everything will be there.
Cool. Luca, you're up next.
All right. I could also do this in sort of a Seinfeld-esque reading, which is, where are the playmats from the first Kickstarter?
So yeah, I know we got a lot of requests for the designs from the original designs for the playmats to make a return for this campaign. But I think there's a few things that I've gone back on, like the World of Earthborne Rangers book. The demand for that was much greater than I anticipated, so I felt comfortable bringing it back. Because I think we can still make that print run work based on the level of interest that we seem to have. So I wasn't originally going to bring that back, brought that back. Wasn't originally going to bring back the Valley map, but that's just so cool, I brought that back. But the playmats, I think, to me, I like having limits on playmat designs. I've worked a lot on playmats, and oftentimes you end up, a playmat will sell really well, and you're like, oh, that looks great, that's awesome, let's print more of it. And then then suddenly you have a bajillion playmats that no one wants to buy. So
I mean,
going out on
interject.
top when there's demand for them and people are like, I wish I could have gotten those things. It's like, it's okay. There'll be more mats and there will be more playmats. So we have these playmats in this campaign. Just like the first ones, these ones won't be reprinted again after we're out of them. But the great thing about card games is that there's so much awesome art that will never be short of playmats. We'll always have new ones, new designs, new artwork. So however many years down the road when these the original Kickstarter mats, I think they'll be a little bit special because people say, yeah, I got these on the very first Kickstarter of this game. And who knows, maybe it's like 10 years later and there's a bajillion playmats that are all awesome. But the people who were there for the first ones can remember that they participated in that at the very beginning. And I think that's kind of cool. So yeah, I'm sorry that we're not bringing them back, but we'll have lots of cool playmats for you to choose from in the years to come.
right,
Anecdotally, I can confirm that you're absolutely correct, Andrew. When I was working at a game store, like there would be a print run of mats for some game and it'd be great, and then like the second shipment would just languish for years sometimes. So unfortunately it is true. When they first come out, super cool, exciting, a lot of people get them. But like then they just sit there.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, last Gamefound FAQ from Evan.
Okay. My dividers from the first printing are short. Can I get new ones?
Sorry. Yes. So the solution to this, I thought about, because these are, again, they can get kind of expensive to make and then add to products. So like, again, for ease, I wanted to not add them to the errata pack. And they felt more like a nice to have item. And I think they're really going to apply mostly to people who are going to continue to play this game and are probably here getting more things. So ultimately, if you get Legacy of the Ancestors and Stewards of the Valley, you will get dividers in both of those products that you'll be able to use then to continue to organize your cards from the core game. That just means that we just need to put a few extra ones into Legacy for the sets, for the trail sets. But that's it. Everything else is that, like in Stewards, for example, we have cards for each specialty in each background. So you'll be getting new dividers for all those. In Legacy, you'll be getting new ones for your Ranger deck and your displaced cards and the rewards. And then obviously pivotal locations and there's a new general set and mission set. So it's all the same set names. So you'll be able to combine them all. So that's the plan for that. So if you're sweating your dividers, if you get those two expansions, then you'll be all set.
And
I'm glad
the new
that
ones will be... Oh, go ahead, Evan.
I was just going to say I'm glad that question was asked because I didn't even think about dividers. Still got to make dividers for Legacy of the Ancestors. So it doesn't take long. But
No, yeah. And they'll be taller.
5 millimeters, right?
Yes, about 5 millimeters. They'll be the size they were supposed to be for the first printing. So they'll be the right size, let's just say.
Sweet. All right. Well, those are our FAQs from the Gamefound. Obviously, you can just come into the Gamefound, ask a comment. Corey and I will be there answering questions. You can also come to our Discord to ask questions there if you have any. So with that, we'll move on. We are going to do some kind of general listener questions, most of them somewhat related to our new stuff. But before that, I did keep one segment that we've been doing lately because I like it, which is our question for Darren. For any new listeners who are joining us, Darren, the Dependable, has sent in a question for us. I'm pretty sure every episode. Did he miss a couple of the early ones, Andrew?
I think he's maybe the first couple he didn't, but almost all of them, if not all of them.
And at a certain point, he worried he was running out. So we now have been asking him a question, which is actually just a question for all of you. So we asked people how they found the game, how they first came into it. We asked them about their characters, and people can answer, usually in the podcast channel of the Discord. One thing I wanted to ask you all this week is I've seen you speculating about this a little bit already, but now that you've seen in Stewards of the Valley, we've got our new Spirit Speaker specialty and a tail spinner background. Am I okay? I realize I wrote this question, Andrew, but I didn't pass by you this second part of this. Is that okay for me to say?
The second part of the sentence?
The part I have highlighted right now. Can I say that?
Sure, yeah, why not? I think we've alluded to this. We've alluded to this.
Yeah, so we have 3 more
at least, right?
At least of each of these specialties and backgrounds planned, in addition to the Spirit Speaker and the Tail Spinner. We have 3 more of each. So what do you all, our listeners, think they are? What would you put in those slots, or what do you where do you think we're going with this? I've seen some people speculate and like using some of the different rangers you run into in the core set to kind of like speculate on different roles rangers might have. But I'm curious to see what people come up with now that you've seen the first 2.
Yeah, that's a good question. Go ahead, Davi.
Okay, I'm going to anticipate the comment of someone's going to be like, they don't have anything planned and they're just trying to farm ideas. So someone's going to say that, and...
But Davi, you can back me up. We've got a planning document with all of these already planned out. Yeah.
Well, and I think we've already, if you listen back to older episodes, I think we've already given away a lot of this because we talked about this.
Oh, did we already?
We did.
Oh, well.
So this is for people who are longtime listeners of the show. Go back and scrub through other episodes to hear what we said. But you
just ruin someone's weekend.
Yeah, you'll be able to pick a few of them out just by that conversation for sure.
Yeah, probably. All right, so let's jump into some listener questions. And, of course, dependable as always, we have Darren. Darren asks, in a previous episode, Andrew said he'd love to keep supporting Earthborne Rangers with new content for years, given that the economics of it made sense. How are those economics looking these days? And how has the response to the Gamefound campaign thus far updated those numbers?
That's looking good, Darren. It's looking real good. So it's, yes, I think it will continue to make sense. I think that's one of the great things about doing a reprint campaign. I mean, we do still have, obviously, a little bit of work left to do on Legacy and on Stewards and on the Moments on the Path. But it's nothing compared to what we had to do after the last campaign. So, every dollar that we earned was spent on the creation of Earthborne Rangers of that core set. This time around, we've already done so much work on everything else that the success of this Gamefound campaign will really allow us to obviously to finish and then produce everything. But everything beyond that, it really opens it up for us to now work, continue to work on new things. So that's incredibly exciting. And, we have plenty of Earthborne Ranger stuff planned, but we also have other things we want to do. Like the other game we've been alluding to for the past, year. That's the next game we're going to be doing a campaign for. But then, we have other ideas.
Luke's played that game.
Yeah. Yes. Luke has played that game.
I played that game.
Oh, that's true. All right.
Yeah.
Everyone's played it.
I love that game.
So yeah, it's really great, and it's a tremendous relief. I mean, honestly, I always do all of my estimates at their most extreme. So I was, for all of our quotes, I've already looked at it as like, what's the most expense? Like how expensive can this get? And then look at the numbers from that perspective, saying, oh, well, it's going to cost this amount. worst case scenario. And then, if we did estimates based on like, well, if we made exactly what we did last time, how would we do? And we'd be all right. So we're already there on the campaign. So that's amazing. So everything beyond this point in particular really opens us up to do all sorts of cool stuff. So right now I'm feeling really bullish, Darren. I got to tell you. So let's keep it rolling.
All right. Next up, THX 1138 asks, any chance to have micro expansions like the one-day missions or challenges in a printed form at some point? Would be great to bridge the waiting time between larger campaign expansions further, and could go for a few bucks without needing to save up. So, any interest in doing smaller expansions for the game?
Oh, yes, definitely. But again, it's just a matter of time. And I think that's part of what, once we see where the Gamefound lands as far as the final numbers, like how we can allocate those resources. So, I have a bajillion ideas. You have ideas. Everyone's got ideas. But it's just...
Davi actually
got great ideas. Yeah.
For this exact kind of product. Like, I think like 2 weeks ago, you mocked up quite a bit of one.
Yeah. We tested it a bit.
Yeah. So it'd be great. It's just a question, it's like, even though it might be like a small physical thing, all the work that goes into making it happen is still substantial because it's all production. It's all got to be, we have to go through the entire process of quoting it, the process of making it and then delivering it. It's like there's a lot, and it's not overly complicated, especially once you kind of have a few of these under our belts. It should get easier and easier, but it is time. So it's just a question of, can we afford the humans it would take to help make some of this stuff possible? But I am 100% for it. I think that would be awesome.
All right. Next up, Tobin asks, my wife and I love the art in the game, particularly the role and human cards. Is there any way to purchase prints of such work?
That's a good question for you, Evan. Do you know, is anyone selling prints? They have the ability to.
Someone reached out to me shortly after the first campaign and asking about that, and I didn't know how to answer it. But I think later on you might have, I thought I asked you if I could do that.
I think you asked me and I said they should read their contract because it says specifically they can do it.
But I'm not sure if, I'm sure it's happened, but I haven't heard from any artists asking, about that. So.
I meant like, have you heard of anyone saying like, oh, I'm selling prints?
No, I haven't actually. Yeah. But I'm not the most like, I don't really have my finger on the pulse of social media, so it could have happened and I just didn't realize it. So I would happily sell prints of stuff I did. So
yeah.
I do know that Zhang has prints on his website, right? I don't know if he has any of the art he did for us on his shop, but I do know he sells prints.
Yeah, so all of our artists have the ability to. They have a indefinite free use license to use the artwork that we purchased from them as a commission. They can print it on stuff. Like the only stipulation is they can't use it in another game. But yeah, like if there's an art piece that you really like, we have the artist credit right there on the card. Look them up. Reach out, see what they say. I bet you they'd be willing to do it.
Sweet. Thank you, Tobin. And we appreciate the kind words about the art.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next up, Mango 2, or I guess M4NGO2. I'm pretty sure it's Mango 2. When you decide to travel and set up a new location in the game, where are you? Are you already at the new location, or did you just arrive at a previous location and are now traveling to the new location?
An agent question.
I pulled in this one because it's a very common one when people first start playing the game.
Yeah.
And, we'll have a lot of new players soon, whether you be checking out the demo right now or you're going to get the game later this year. And it's this question of, like, what... when you construct a new path deck, when you arrive at a location, you put that location into play, but you build the path deck based on the trail that you were hiking on to get there. So people kind of wonder, where am I, right? Am I at the location? Am I walking to it? Am I leaving? Like, how should I tell my story in the game, right? And they're kind of curious how this is abstracted. If you all don't mind, I do have an anecdote for this, which is...
I think you should definitely share it. It's good, but like it's interesting seeing these come up because I'd forgotten when we were first playtesting the traveling and how it worked. I remember I had difficulty wrapping my mind around this as well for like maybe the first couple plays. But then it just kind of became second nature. So I think it's interesting to see people have the same question.
Yeah, we messed around with naming the locations not locations. We'd like call them landscapes for a while to try to get this idea. But like part of the idea is that a lot of these locations, we show them as a single icon in the map, but these are big places. They're not like a single little building or something. These are like a town, a mountain, the area around it. And you might kind of, from a map level, think about it as a single point. But the kind of anecdote I always tell people is that, so I climbed Long's Peak out in Colorado a few years ago, more than a few years ago now, but a while back. So I took this route called the Keyhole route, where you go up this, you go through this wooded area and you climb this field of boulders and you go through this rock formation called the Keyhole. So I had this kind of experience in the woods and climbing on these rocks. And then a friend of mine also climbed Long's Peak, who's a little bit more adventurous than I am. And they did this route on the east face called Kiner's Route, I think it's called. And it's basically intense cliff climbing, right? They're climbing up sheer cliffs and doing all this kind of intense mountain climbing. And at the end of the day, we both climbed Long's Peak. We can both say we were both at Long's Peak on the days we climbed, but we encountered incredibly different things while we were at Long's Peak, right? I was hiking up this side of the mountain with all this woods. He was climbing this rock face, right? But we were both at this location. And so we think about this similarly. When you are kind of going into a location, the reason you use the path that you traveled in along is because you are... you might be coming into towards White Sky, and you're coming down this path from the mountains out east, or you're coming into the woods from the south, and that kind of informs the kind of things you're encountering. Even though you're arriving at this location, the way you were traveling is determining what you're running into. And a lot of the things you can run into in our game are like people or, different things that can end up finding anywhere. So it's a little abstracted from a single pinpoint location.
I always saw it as, take for example, Meadow, you're traveling in Meadow and you might run into someone from Meadow, even though you're taking by way of a ravine or grasslands. I just always imagine that the people of the valley are just always on the move and they're not just hanging out in their home 24/7. They're out doing stuff. So that's how I played it out in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. All right. Well, next question. I mostly just included this to hype you up, Evan. But our next question is from Cleanse. Is question for Evan. Do you know how amazing all of the new stuff looks?
Oh,
the art is just
nice.
Gorgeous.
Do you, Evan? Nice. Do you?
Well, I did read this earlier, and I was thinking about it, and I can always feel I can arrive at a point of satisfaction with a piece. I know I did my best on it, but it's really not up to me to decide if it's good or not. I think art is up. It's up to the people who consume it or view it. So I don't know if it's good or not. Ultimately, it's up to you. So, but it sounds like you like it, so that's really cool, and I love hearing that. So thank you.
Well, that's why I'm here, Evan. So I'm here to judge you.
And that's another thing. Like, there's if I was just making art completely unhinged without Andrew kind of reining me in, like, it might look totally different. And it may not look cool. I don't know.
I don't feel like I'm ever reining you in. I feel like at least I'm trying to at least get you to follow your muse.
Yeah. What I mean is you provide a lot of great insight that just enriches what I'm working on. So yeah.
Yeah, I am the proxy for the larger audience, and hopefully my taste coincides with everyone else. It seems like it does. Your work is phenomenal. I love everything you do. So
when you look back on some of like you look back at the core set, you look at pieces you drew there, to your comment about like you're not sure if they're good or not, do you, after you have a little space from the piece, do you look at it and you're like, oh, I did a good job there, or do you see all the flaws still?
I definitely know what you mean, because there's a lot of just having a lot of countless sketchbooks growing up that I shelve and like forget about because I'm not happy with what I've made in there. I'll review them later on, years later. I'm like, oh, it wasn't so bad. So there is like a time and space effect that comes into play that changes, and that definitely has changed my perspective on some of the early things, because with the early stuff, I had this mindset that we were just building the world. Like, the world was just 5 feet in front of us, and I was expanding outwards, so there's a lot of confusion and like uncertainty with that, where like, I don't know what the world's supposed to look like, but it was pretty much up to us. But that stress about that tainted how I saw things. But now that I have a better understanding of how everything looks, I can look back fondly on these things and like enjoy them for different reasons and stuff. So it's kind of hard to articulate. I got to think about it a little bit more.
Nah.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, exactly what you mean. I think too, like keeping up with your skills the way you have is, I think, also just a boon. Like for my experience with like those old sketchbooks, like sometimes I go back and look at them and be like, man, I was meticulous. Like that was a very different me drawing that thing. Whereas now I'm like, I just got to get it done as quickly as possible, and it's like super loose. So like I just don't really take the time to do any finished pieces anymore. It's been such a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. And keep that up and keep growing and keep honing your skill. I think it's badass.
Well, we're certainly giving you a lot of chance to practice with the sheer number of cards.
Yeah, and also lots of challenges too. It's not like Evan's like we have people who are like, this is the person to do, like artist wise, who are like, this person would be great for X. But Evan just has to do everything, so he's got to be great at everything, and thankfully he is.
As good as I can be at everything.
Yeah, that's right.
No, great at everything.
Great at everything.
No, it's funny. That's
flawless.
That's how I play like D&D characters. I'm always trying to be a character that's like a jack of all trades. So I don't know. I guess that just
I'm the opposite. My D&D characters, I always try to like completely dump one thing and then spike something else. Just because like I find characters with just crippling weaknesses to be kind of entertaining to play.
Yeah.
Min-maxing.
Well, but what you don't realize is that jack of all trades is weak at everything, though. So if you really want to have fun, play a jack of all trades character.
All right. Last general listener question before we dive into expansions is from Eric. What is your next convention?
That's a good question. Did we decide? Is someone going to Con of the North?
I don't know if we decided. I thought we were getting more detail on the table we could get, and then we were going to find out. We might be at Con of the North, but it won't be like a real presence. It would be like me hanging out with a copy of the game for anybody who wants to chill with me.
So yeah, I would say it's either going to be Con of the North or Probably, I don't know. We'll see if we want to show up to Gen Con. We missed the window to register for a booth space or anything of significance at Gen Con. So if we went, it would be in kind of a guerrilla fashion.
I will probably be at Gen Con this year.
There you go.
But it might, I might just be me with an Earthborne T-shirt walking around.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if you spot an Earthborne T-shirt, say hi.
Yeah, so I might do the same thing. Last Gen Con, I had a moment, and I'm wearing my I'd rather be a Gen Con shirt, which I always wear, ironically. But last year I felt like I had a little twinge of missing just seeing people that I knew. Because a lot of people that I know go there, so it'd be fun to see people. So I might do it for that as well. That could be cool. But as an official, like, Earthborne, I think it's looking like it's going to just be PAX Unplugged again. Like, that's our show for now.
We had such a good time.
Yeah, it was super fun. Yeah. But if we have the bandwidth to do more, I think we will. But again, like, go back to my comments about doing more products. Like, prepping for a show is a lot of work. So I don't think we have a whole lot of bandwidth for it. I think we can probably fit one more show in a year. So we could maybe do 2 a year. But for now, I think we're just doing one.
All right. Well, that wraps up our general listener questions. So now we are moving on to what we have our special guests here for, which is we're going to be talking about expansions. So we're going to start talking about Legacy of the Ancestors here with Luke. And obviously, either of you are free to jump in. I know, Davi, you've played a bunch of Legacy, so feel free to chat as well. But to start off this segment, we should probably give kind of a high-level pitch of each of these products. I know they're in the Gamefound, but just so that people kind of have a baseline, who wants to give me the high-level pitch of Legacy? Andrew, do you want to pitch this expansion?
Yeah. So Legacy of the Ancestors picks up a couple months after the events of the campaign in the core game. It imagines your ranger continuing your rangers continuing their adventures, but you can also start fresh with the campaign if you want. But big picture, it delves into the archaeology ruin, which is what the village of Spire is built on top of, and is also the ruins of it are then spread throughout the valley, and there's sinkholes that lead down into the archaeology where the Estians lived, the people who lived at this valley thousands of years before the Rangers lived there. So this expansion will give you an opportunity to explore underground, find new paths. There's new path sets, new locations, completely new story, and it just expands the world, expands the lore, and lets you play the game in a little bit different way than you did in the core game.
And basically everybody has touched this expansion. Andrew and Sam have written a bunch of it. I've done a bunch of the design. Brooks worked on it. And then Luke, of course, here did a bunch of the design work. So, Luke, want to tell us about what you did for the expansion?
Yeah. So I handled kind of everything, or I kind of worked on designs for everything that isn't a terrain path card. So the locations, the path cards that are unique to locations, cards in the general set that come into play through different events, and then a lot of the the little like side quests you get from encountering those cards, and then a whole lot of the overarching sort of campaign of the game itself.
Yeah, and like that kind of distinction between, they all go into the path deck, but those path cards that get added by pivotal locations versus the terrain sets, even though they're both path cards, they're very different beasts design-wise. They serve a very different function in the game, right?
Yes, yeah, they definitely do. The you can speak to working on the path cards, but like, I feel like those are sort of like, you know, the given set of path cards for a terrain set is almost like a little like ecosystem you've made, like a little ecosystem of mechanics. And it's sort of, you know, it'll bump into other stuff, but it's mostly sort of self-contained in a way. Whereas like a lot of the cards that are in those location sets, and you know, also just in the underground set, which is the equivalent of the valley, you know, those are sort of like, you know, if this were a video game, you know, those are the unique assets, you know, that are dropped into, you know, settings, and it's like, oh, the thing you interact with to get a side quest or find a special item, right? So a lot of those have, almost all of those in some way have some sort of mechanic that is like going on behind the scenes. It's not just the card itself. You know, so many of them lead into, you know, a little mission you can do, you know, or, you know, have some specific text in the campaign guide to read. So, and they, of course, you know, also can interact with the other cards in that, you know, whatever terrain set they happen to find themselves in interesting ways. So you got to account for that too.
Yeah, so for kind of talking about, I kind of want to dive into a bit more specifics on this expansion, but one thing
Fischer?
I will say... Oh, go ahead.
I think you forgot someone who worked on the expansion.
Oh, yes.
I did the rewards.
I apologize, Davi. Davi did the reward cards.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I need the recognition. I feed on it.
You have a whole section for Stewards of the Valley. No, that is true. Davi, so it kind of... Luke was working a lot of the path card content, and then Davi was working on ranger card content. So as part of doing, in addition to doing Stewards of the Valley, he came in and did the reward cards for this, since they're, you know, kind of a very different section of the game and style of the game.
Yeah.
And you did those...
For me... Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was great to not have... Because, like, you're right. It's, like, totally two different kinds of card design. And so, like, you know, it made my job a whole lot easier not to have to think about, like, oh, what do the actual, like, reward cards do? Davi's already, like, neck deep in Ranger card design. He's already in that world. And so, like, designing the reward cards is, like, just sort of clumped into what you're already working on. I mean, we talked about, like, what stuff should be, you know, and how it relates to, like, quests and stuff. But it was great to have you work on those.
Yeah, it was a fun collaboration, just, like, kind of translating, like, what do you get from doing X, or, you know, so yeah, I didn't want to leave that. No, I'm not just vain. I also wanted to talk about.
No, I'm sorry that I left you off. I was really like, I think I was in like podcast script making mode where, you know, I had like, this is path card section and this is, you know, this is the ranger card section. But yes, so for talking about this, I pulled a few listener questions that kind of related to different the different products. So we'll go through those, and then I've got some questions of my own to kind of throw and give you a chance to kind of talk a bit about your work on this, Luke. One thing I will say, though, our conversation about legacy here is going to be a bit more limited, just because we're trying not to spoil anything too deep into the expansion. So we are going to be talking about a bit of stuff that occurs in this game, but we will try to keep it to kind of similar to how we dealt with spoilers on the core set. We're going to be talking about some of the things that the terrain explores, some of the things you can encounter early on. We won't be talking about any big story developments past the first couple days. We won't be talking about the ending or things you can encounter deeper and later on in the story. So just know that, like, you can listen to this segment without getting spoiled on the whole story, but you will get spoiled for a little bit of it if you really want to go sight unseen. So with that, I'll start off with some questions from listeners, and some of these will be like for various folks. It kind of depends who wants to jump in here. So Solar J asks, firstly, my daughter... Oh, that's right. Solar J asked us about the Terravore a couple episodes ago, and so we have an update. He had a question from his daughter about the Terravore, and so he says, firstly, my daughter has taken the Terravore response we gave to heart and started to produce a poster on the how. I think, Andrew, you had challenged her.
That's so good. I cannot wait to see this poster.
Yeah, Solar J, you have to share this poster when she's done with it. All right, so more relevantly, with the announcement of the new expansion, are there any books or films you might recommend to get into the underground themes explored in Legacy of the Ancestors while we wait? So this kind of goes out to anybody, but what kind of stuff, what underground books or themes do you recommend to Solar J?
I think when we were in, I think earlier in 2023, I was like, it's interesting that people compare, Earthborne to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, because in March they came out with a new game that is basically Breath of the Wild, but you can go underground and above ground. So the themes aren't really the same, but it's an interesting parallel of like you're exploring this dark, creepy kind of like there's things lurking in the darkness. So there's a bit of parallel there, and obviously exploration, open world, and all that. No vehicle building, but we'll leave that one for the future.
Yeah. That wasn't the only game either, too. Elden Ring. I mean, extremely different setting and vibe than Earthborne, but 2023 was a big year for open world games that have an entire underground section.
Yeah,
Andrew, as you were coming, did you have any inspirations you wanted to mention, Andrew?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that's been challenging, and I think one of the gaps in my knowledge that I was hoping to fill last summer was actually going deeper underground, which I've never actually been like super deep underground. I've been pretty deep in a big cave, like enough to really get the sense of what it could feel like and be able to extrapolate a bit. But I always like to draw on my own personal experience, especially for writing, because I feel like it just feels more tactile. I feel like you can really tell the difference. So still trying to make it feel as tactile as possible and draw on what limited experience I have in like various documentaries. There's a really cool episode of, I think... So Will Smith did a series on Disney Plus called Welcome to Earth. Welcome to Earth. And I think there's an episode in there about going underground and the sounds that they pick up down there. And that one really got my imagination going. I thought it was really cool. There's also a really great episode of Planet Earth that talks about undergrounds and caves. I recommend that very much so. But I think as far as like the underground that you can expect to find, it's not like gritty realism, because I Googled some stuff on caves, and let me tell you, there's some pretty scary videos out there. About things that happen to people in caves.
Like are squeezing through those little tiny.
Oh my god!
Yeah, so we're not really we're not really going that real with it. So it's again it's more like more open spaces perhaps than you might find in a real cave system.
We didn't send Luke on a spelunking expedition as on-site research.
No. I watched Descent last year, but it had nothing to do with working on this, and that is not the kind of underground movie I would recommend watching.
I watched that recently
totally
too.
Different vibes.
Yeah.
As far as inspiration, go ahead, Luke.
No. I mean, well, all right. I was going to say I don't know if like. I'm having trouble thinking of like good examples that like capture that kind of like vibe that Legacy of the Ancestors has. But I do, one thing that does come to my mind, like having worked on it, is like a big theme is not just the underground setting, but this sort of like, exploring sort of lost technology, and sort of there's that sort of sense of like not post-apocalyptic. I mean, you guys have talked a lot about like the setting of Earthborne Rangers, but I think some of that sort of like remnants of an earlier age, I think is even stronger somewhat in Legacy of the Ancestors. I mean, the name alone, but like so there's a lot of sort of sense of like sort of alien tech and sort of esoteric contraptions and long dormant machines, so any sort of like sci-fi too that sort of has those vibes, I think also captures a bit of the feel of Legacy of the Ancestors. I mean, kind of like Nausicaa, in the Valley of the Wind, like different setting. There's no sort of setting that lines up there, but like I think in terms of like sort of feel and aesthetic in a way, I think there's some of that going on there.
I was definitely inspired by that movie for certain path types in Legacy of the Ancestors, so totally agree.
Yeah, they'll all have been the path type names are all, I think all but one of them are spoiled at this point, so you can talk about them, Eben, if you want.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, just the I mean, there's the fungal forest path type, and that I really was I watched Nausicaa again because there's aspects of that movie that I remembered having seen it the last time that really stuck out to me. So yeah, I don't have much to say about it without I don't want to delve too deeply into it, but yeah, it was something I really enjoyed researching again.
As far as my inspiration, I definitely agree with Andrew that I lean a lot towards documentaries. For the core set, I tried to pull a lot from personal experience with like hiking and camping and like just being a very outdoorsy person. But also to Andrew's point, I don't have as much experience with caves because no thanks. So I did lean pretty heavily on documentaries, both that Planet Earth episode, the caves episode, and there's another series called like it was like Our Planet, specifically to the fungal forest. I think I watched an episode about fungus specifically for that. And there are things I still tried to pull from personal experience where I could, while I'm not going to go squeeze through any like tight cracks or do any kind of cave diving. I've done like cave tours and stuff, and I'll say that. So I'm not sure if we've spoiled this in the Gamefound or not yet, but this is the very first weather you use, so it's not too much of a spoiler. But one of the weather cards you can get is called Enveloping Silence. And then there are things that can occur that flip it to its other side, which is a reverberating echo. And this weather card pulls directly from my own personal experiences going down into caves. And like, we were on this cave tour where it was pretty cool. They let us out into this big kind of cavern area, and then they just shut off all the lights.
Classic cave tour move.
Yeah, classic cave tour move. And it's like you can like feel the darkness around you. Like it's like enveloping in this way that I can't quite articulate. And then like we were in this pitch black, and something happened, like not with our tour, but way away. And it was like this clang of somebody like hitting the railing of like one of the walkways or something. And it just like echoes through, and it like almost shattered this feeling of like this like physical darkness around us. And anyway, so that exact experience of being underground and feeling that silence and darkness enveloping you is what led to that kind of weather. It's really stretching the definition of weather, but it is like kind of trying to explain and mechanize the kind of physical experience around you in this underground area. So there is some personal experience being pulled on here.
That's awesome.
Not as much because caves are scary. All right, so next up we have a question from Chubfrog. who asks, in Legacy of the Ancestors, are reward cards being seeded in the same way that they were in the core set? Does this become a challenge to seed combos for starting cards as the number of backgrounds and specialties is expanding?
What does he mean by seeded?
I think like how they're being given out to players.
Okay.
So I guess this is for probably both Luke and Davi. Luke, you designed a bunch of the stuff that gives out the reward cards, and Davi, you designed the rewards themselves. So Luke, can you speak to like how they're being given out compared to the core set?
I mean, I don't think they're being given out in a drastically different way than the core set. I think there are, I think more rewards given for shorter, I guess, quest lines in some instances. There's some that, see, I don't want to spoil stuff. This expansion does something totally new with rewards. So there's some that you need. The reward, the fact that it's a reward is actually secondary, kind of to like it as a game mechanic. So yeah, it you'll get some soon because you need them to do things, I guess, is a really vague way of saying that it is different in some cases.
Yeah. And I think making the rewards, there's a particular part to the question is like seeding the combos or like cards that, you know, certain people want. So I don't think is it a spoiler to say that some of the rewards will be special to cards from the core set?
That's fine.
There's manifestations, right? Like that's one of the things that was in the core set, and so we don't want to like drop support for Chapers just because it's in the core set and all that. But then we have new things, and the Spirit Speaker again, yeah, same as Luke. Don't want to spoil too much, but they have a very close tie with what's going on in the expansion and kind of the story. So there's some cool stuff in terms of, you know, how this card becomes a reward or how this experience becomes a reward. And yeah, also just like the special rewards that you'll get and focusing a little bit more on not just giving out just better and better cards, but like, what do you need when you're down in the arcology? Like, what's a cool tool for you to have, or how would someone offer some help to you or some insight for you down there? So definitely been a cool design experience.
That is a good point. I think like a lot of decisions were made for thematic reasons. Like what feels like a thing I could get from doing this. But I think also there was more attention paid to like what are things that would be useful mechanically in this setting as well. So like there are some that are like kind of like specifically like, you know, maybe the like clearest example is like, you know, something that interacts with a keyword or a type of feature that like you see a lot of in, you know, while exploring the expansion.
Well, and I think something you guys hit on a little bit is something we've talked about in previous episodes as we kind of chatted about what might come from these expansions as we were working on it, is a question of progression. We, you know, like there's a lot of these kind of games where the characters just grow in kind of this linear fashion, but in Rangers, while you did see quite a bit of growth in the core set, you're not going to see quite as like that same linear growth continuing every expansion. Instead, we're trying to kind of offer, instead of like differences in value, differences in kind, what this means is like some of the things we've designed in Legacy are unique mechanics that are different from what's in the core set, so you need different tools to deal with them. And so some of what Luke is alluding to is early on you're going to get rewards that like give you tools to deal with these new problems, right? And so as you go underground, you might want certain cards in your deck that you aren't going to need when you go back up to the valley.
Do you want to talk about any of those mechanics? I'm interested.
Yeah. I guess we can probably share.
Yeah,
we'll have
I think so.
an update coming.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about it. And, not everyone who's following the Gamefound obviously is going to listen to this, so there'll be new stuff and we can get into it, I think, in more detail in written form, too. But, I think at the very least, if you talk about the illumination mechanic and how that works, and then you can imagine what rewards you might get to help you with that.
A lantern that the Discord has already named.
Yeah, I saw that. Sharp.
Did they get it right?
No, they just I think Chub Frog named the slug that's in the lantern.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In Quizzy's piece, she's got there was a debate over whether it was lava in that globe or a slug. And then when Davi chimed in and said it was a slug, Chub Frog demanded that the slug be named Lava.
I love that.
Yeah,
That's
Quizzy
totally
would definitely name her slug Lava.
Yeah, Quizzy would name... I'm going to name you Lava. Yeah, that's great.
But yes, okay. So the two big... So there's a bunch of new things we play around with in this expansion. There are some, terrain set specific mechanics, like the fungal forest, but... it has some interesting stuff in it, but there's two broad mechanics that show up basically throughout. And so Luke got to design a bunch of cards that interact with some of this stuff. So one is illumination. I think people have keen-eyed people have picked out discussion of this on the cards. So the way this works, do we want to just fully talk about? I mean, it's going to be in the rules, so...
Yeah,
I think this one.
Yeah, totally.
So the way this works is it is a thing that cards and different game effects can check for. It can check if, the card can say if this is illuminated, if this feature is illuminated, if this being is illuminated. And the way you become illuminated is if there is something else in the same area as you. So if you're within reach. If you're along the way. That has the keyword illumination. So it's basically there's lights and then there's effects that look to see if there is currently a light there. And that's how the mechanic works. But of course it gets a lot more interesting when we design cool thematic effects, like well, I guess I should explain the other mechanic for that, but some ancient device that can light up or go dark based on different situations, and then, some horrible creature that likes it being dark, But it's not always a good thing to be lit. There's some effects in the game that when they're illuminated, things get worse for you. And so there's kind of this mini game of trying to manage your board to make sure that there's light where you want it, but not where you don't. Can you? So Luke, when you were working on cards, now we'd already kind of established some of the terrain sets and how they were kind of playing with illumination, but your cards got to kind of then jump in and kind of ride on that mechanical architecture. So did you play around with any cards that touch that at all?
Yeah. So. That was there was a little bit of illumination in every single path set in some way. Some emphasize it more than others. So there are definitely location cards or even locations themselves, location path cards or the actual location card that care about whether things are illuminated or not. Maybe it's within reach, maybe it's along the way. But what's fun is that because there's those couple location cards that care, and I wouldn't say every single location card cares. This is maybe some locations more than others. Maybe it's one card, maybe it's two cards. But because the path sets themselves have varying degrees of how easy or difficult it is to achieve illumination, then it makes those unique location path cards that care about it potentially easier or harder to interact with depending on what terrain path set you have at that location at that time, right? So maybe the more sort of tech focused, sort of broken ecology type one that has a lot of like mechanical equipment that illuminates things. And you can achieve illumination way easier, but maybe that's not the terrain set that you entered that location with. And so now it's really harder. It's much harder to like get some feature illuminated so that you can have some sort of effect. Certain features are like really hard to put progress on because it's pitch black. You can't see what you're doing. But if you can get them illuminated, it becomes like way easier to achieve progress. So I definitely played around with it, and I think it's not the only instance too where you maybe want players may choose like, oh, we almost want to like go to this location later so that we can come at it from this direction and get this terrain set at this location rather than coming at it from our current direction and have this other terrain set that just makes it harder to deal with.
We did have to recently nerf one of your locations that cared about illumination, Luke. It was ending.
I'm not surprised.
It was ending people's day in like,
I mean,
a very hasty fashion.
that is a part of the fun of designing the path cards and locations, because you kind of get to be the bad guy. You kind of come up with stuff that's going to mess with players. And sometimes it has to be toned down.
You talked about the arcology ruins terrain set, and that does bring us to the kind of the other overarching theme that we have across a bunch of stuff, which is power, and specifically called power, but energy, electricity. So even though a lot of this is incredibly ancient, there is stuff down here that is still functional for reasons that you'll kind of see. But because of that, there are devices, ancient technologies that can still function and still kind of manage power. And so you can, as Rangers, come in and kind of jury-rig things together from some of these ruins to make different things happen. Mechanically, that's realized as like some of these old... well, we'll call them robots or
machines.
Machines, yeah, that you'll run into. Yeah. They'll have power tokens, and you'll be able to kind of like, through different effects, potentially kind of push and pull these around. And how that kind of resource integrates into the ecosystem gives this whole kind of new element. And as it combines with illumination, kind of creates these really interesting situations. So my earlier example of like, oh, you want it lit or dark, now you have potentially some kind of strange ancient circuit, and if you interact with it correctly, you can potentially reroute power, and that lights up some other device. But then like you realize that it's like enraged the gribbly biomeld that's down the tunnel from you, and now you have to like reroute the power to get get things dark again. So it just gives us a lot of like really interesting state-based stuff to play with, and like especially as this one's going to be tricky for us to talk about, Luke, but especially as you get later, that power stuff came into play in quite a bit on your designs. Yes, yeah, it was just from a like, anytime you're designing anything, like the more sort of like, I know. Maybe this is an FFG thing. I don't know if other designers like to use these terms, but like knobs and levers and things to pull and change, to tweak. And like the set introduced like another one in the form of these power tokens. And one design aspect that's I think well executed is that like it's not a new mechanic. It is using many cards already have like that little box where they can have a unique type of token added to them. So it's just that. And in this case, they're called, power token. Yeah, it is power. Yeah. And so like the new idea is that there's a lot of like keywords or like abilities or, even challenge effects that like, if it has this much power on it, then it does a thing, and that represents as being powered up. So it dovetails with the existing works with the existing mechanics really nicely. But it was a thing that was consistently used, throughout a lot of path sets, and then I could put on, a lot of the unique cards. And it was a way to represent the Rangers'
like interacting with something in a way that's not just putting progress on it. I think that was a bit of a mechanical theme, I think, in a lot of ways with this expansion, is challenging players to complete, objectives on cards through things other than just putting progress on it. Whether it's powering it up, whether it is, they have to interact with a different type of feature. They can't put any progress on this thing for reasons, but they can put progress on something else, and that will advance the thing that they're actually trying to interact with. Or in some cases, they have to do an entirely different type of test. They can't do a traverse test to do it. I think this expansion plays around more too with the Ranger tokens. There's a lot of cards that are like, well, there's definitely a theme of cards that are like, you can clear this, but if you clear it with your Ranger token on it, it's better. And there's like an extra harder test you have to do to get your Ranger token on it first. So I appreciated having lots of knobs and levers to pull to challenge players to interact with the cards in interesting ways.
Hey, I had a question. Are we planning on doing achievements for Legacy of the Ancestors? Like,
sure,
new badges?
Yeah,
I have an idea for one.
We have to, right?
I got an idea for the name of one, not what you have to do.
Ah,
nice.
Power Rangers.
Power Rangers.
Power Rangers.
yeah.
Yeah. Do something with power tokens. Enough times.
That's great.
Right.
Yep.
I'm into it.
I'll give you your Power Rangers achievement, Evan, and you can make a little badge that has a bunch of 5 colors of Ranger. Like,
sweet.
all right, so we've got a few more things to talk about with Legacy, but we are at an hour and a half, and we've got a lot more to talk about tonight. So, Andrew, do we want to cut it off here? Do you want to keep going? What do you think?
Well, we have time left. Like, you said we're only at an hour and a half. Like,
Only, yeah.
yeah, we're not
Only.
even. Yeah, we're coming around the bend. How about let's do one more big question for Legacy,
Okay.
and then we'll call this episode an episode, and then we'll do the next one.
And we can jump back into the next one and finish out our Legacy conversation, and then jump in to talk with Stewards of the Valley too.
Well, that's just inconvenient. I want to get all my Legacy information in one spot.
Okay, all right, we want to finish out Legacy here and now then.
Yeah, I think so. We finish Legacy, we'll break, and then we can we'll do Stewards.
All right. But I had some good questions for Evan for this one.
Well,
we got to get.
Sure, then ask him. Let's just go. Yeah, I don't have anywhere to be. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's at least jump over to some questions for Evan, which is, Evan, what is your favorite piece of art that you made for Legacy of the Ancestors specifically?
Oh, that I made.
Oh no, that
was made.
You
that
and
was
your
made.
team created.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, okay. I was like, I'm not prepared for this. Yeah, I do have a favorite piece from Legacy. I don't know if it's like my ultimate favorite, but I just love it a lot. And I can share my screen to show it off. The piece of art is location art for a location called the Desert of Endless Night. And let's see here. Sorry about this delay. There we go. Okay. So this is... Can you see it?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, this is one of the first pieces of location art that was commissioned for Legacy of the Ancestors, and the artist is Rob Lasky, who he's done all the attachment art and a bunch of location art for the core game and for Legacy. But this one, I think what struck me about this one is just the idea of the location itself and how Rob executed it. It's basically a desert that's underground in this cavernous expanse that, is looks pretty much beyond comprehension, its depth. And one of the things I really like about it is how the lantern light coming from the point of view of the viewer is so complementary to the cool blues in the scene, but also it only reaches so far into the scene itself before just being swallowed by the darkness. And in addition to that, all the pinpoint bits of bioluminescent fungus that is that suggests the expanse of the cavern itself that the desert is in, and also how it kind of girdles the stone columns and the stalactites, and just overall, I think it was a really fun. This location really got my creative gears turning on how this could be seen. So it stuck with me through the whole commissioning process, and so yeah, this is the one that I like.
Yeah, I love the kind of lantern light in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
I really think, whenever I'd kind of envisioned how this piece would end up looking, I'd pictured like, all the pinpricks of light to create the kind of night sky effect that we had talked about, but like that different color temperature of light just going in the foreground really brings this extra like element to it that like grounds it in a really cool way.
Yeah, and back to what you said about the weather cards and the is it called Oppressive Darkness? Is that or did that change?
Enveloping darkness.
Silence.
Enveloping darkness. Okay.
Silence. Yeah.
So I also have this duality in mind when I look at that piece. Like it feels both. Like I'm dealing with agoraphobia and the opposite, claustrophobia at the same time when I look at it, because the darkness really encroaches in on the viewer, but also you get a sense of how big the space is. So I guess in a way it plays into the whole light mechanic that the game introduces to.
Well, that kind of ties into something else I wanted to ask you about, which was just that, like, obviously making art for all your art being underground is like kind of a big shift from all of the outdoor bright daylight vistas that we did in the core set. So like, what kind of shifts did you have to make? What were the biggest challenges kind of changing over to this very different art style?
I'm just coming to terms with the fact that in order for the piece to look good, you had to make some stretches of the imagination with dramatic lighting. And when a lot of the lighting of the valley is, over... When I commissioned art for the core game, a lot of my art briefs are like, imagine the lighting is high noon, like coming from top down, like sunlight. But here I usually was asking for light coming from horizontal angles to help, in my mind, that seemed like that helped illustrate this is a different type of space, and there's an overhead light. Although there are places in the arcology where there will be overhead light, kind of like those bioluminescent mushrooms in the desert piece. But just to push that, there's a lot of hot and cold light that kind of splash in from the sides, as opposed to from above, and like rim lighting from the sides. So that was one thing. And then just playing with the color of light as well. There's certain arcology areas that just cast a different type of light, and so that was fun to play with. And it was a challenge not to stay true to the light quality that you would expect, but not have everything muddy looking. So it was challenging.
Yeah, we just definitely need to fudge it.
Yeah, for sure.
Your point about playing with colors of light, like kind of those more unnatural colors of light, I didn't really think about that, but that's really interesting to really set it apart from all of the sunlight in the core set.
Yeah, and when you think about lighting, I think about lighting a lot, and a lot of it was informed by just exploring 3D spaces like in Blender and realizing, volumetric lighting really simulates real life lighting really well. And when you take the sun out of an image, the atmosphere still is casting light from all angles. So like I had that in mind when I was making a lot of art for the core game. But in Legacy of the Ancestors, there isn't this environmental lighting that is hitting you from all angles, and complementing the direct light source. There's just this strong singular light sources that aren't. So there's a lot of more contrast, is what I'm trying to say, in some of the figures and features that you would encounter in this expansion. So
cool. Well, it's looking great. As pointed out by Cleanse earlier on, it's looking incredible.
Thank you, Cleanse.
Yeah, some of the location art, all the location art in this game is awesome. But there are definitely some in particular that come to mind that like are really evocative, and like I was thinking about mentioning one, and I'm like, but I don't want to, because like that's so cool when you find out that like that is underground. You know, I think there's a lot of creativity in like an underground desert. Like that's a great example of like, you know, there's stuff like this is a huge underground area, and there's stuff down here you're not going to expect, and like it's really pretty cool. So like even talking about the art too much is a spoiler.
All right. Well, to round out some of our conversation about Legacy here, Luke, this was your first experience designing for Rangers. So you were kind of new to the game as you came in. So kind of a two-part question. First, I want you to talk about what was kind of challenging. What was the most difficult thing about designing for Rangers? And then talk about what was cool about it. What was different about designing for Rangers than some of the other design work you've done?
Right. Well, I think like in terms of challenges, there's a big difference between this set and the setting of the core set. And what I was working on was primarily a lot of things that lead to missions and activities for the players to do, for the Rangers to do, cool stuff for them to encounter. In the core set, a lot of those are given out by NPCs. It's all populated valleys. There's all kinds of people. But, you know, and there are some people down here that you'll encounter in the ruins. And that was fun to do those for sure. But I had to get, you know, creative, you know, we all had to get creative to come up with like more things that were interesting that can lead to, you know, side missions for the Rangers, because there's just not as many people down here to give out side quests for you.
Yeah, especially with how we mechanized that with like Helping Hand in the core set, which is, you know, oh, hey, do you want help? Yes, I want help. I will come with you, right? And so
just
like,
bring me here. Yep.
It is very people-centric in the core set.
Yes, so we had to get creative. Yeah, and then I think the other challenge too, you know, and I think, you know, this was a good exercise for me to grow as a designer too, is, you know, a lot of my past design experience has been, you know, more sort of competitive focused, you know, player versus player gameplay, you know, very mechanic forward, or, you know, to use the term, you know, bottom up design, where it's sort of, there's a theme, but it's sort of, you know, really mechanic first, theme second, you know, or theme inspires a bit of mechanics, but then the mechanics drive, you know, primarily what you're doing. Whereas, you know, this game is very theme heavy, and very, like, the setting is, you know, the most important part of the game. So, you know, that was a challenge to sort of think through, okay, thematically, you know, what should be down here, you know, what's interesting, what are cool experiences for the players, and to come at it from that direction, you know. And I think obviously both Andrews were a huge help there, you know, especially, you know, Navarro, you know, just because like there's so much, you know, of this setting that, you know, you're the lore expert on this, right? You know, and I think it's cool getting to like design in this world, but it's not like some other IP, like Star Wars, where it's like, yeah, I know Star Wars. I can just read Wikipedia articles and stuff like that. Whereas it was cool to like work in this like totally different and very like realized setting that's different from everything else. But a bit of the challenge is like I can't just type into Google, what's, in the Earthborne Rangers Valley, that's stuff that's, written down, somewhere, or maybe just in Andrew's head at the moment. So
I don't know if people will remember this by the time they have this expansion in hand and are playing it, but there was one location that I won't spoil the details of where I think this challenge reared its head a bit, like, you were approaching some bottom up designs, and I think I told you like make some really weird shit, and you came back with a bunch of really weird stuff. And I think even though we've like integrated it and like kind of written it into this location in the setting, I think you can still tell which location I told you to do that on. And so when people have this in their hands, I'd be curious if they could guess which location, which pivotal location it is.
Yes. I think, well, and that was, I think, the fun part too, is like, there's definitely, I was encouraged to make stuff weird. And that's always fun, despite the sort of, I don't want to say there are like constraints on the setting, but like, I think part of the game, not just Legacy of the Ancestors, but Earthborne Rangers in general, I think part of its strength is like how well realized and unique, the setting is. But, so that dictates some certain things that, will or won't sort of appear. But sort of beyond that, there's like a lot of freedom to like really get creative, with what is in the game. So yeah, some of my favorite stuff is the weirder stuff that you find underground here.
And it certainly gets weirder, especially once you get to the lowest strata. So
it gets weirder the lower you go.
Yeah. I'm excited for people to dive in and actually see it. I know, I'm sorry we couldn't talk incredible details about the things you worked on, Luke, but
no, it's okay. It'll be a lot of fun to, as I'm a long way off, of course, but when people get it in their hands, and I'm sure I'll follow, try and find where people are talking about it online and enjoy people's reactions to certain things.
Yeah. And for those of you who are curious, we talked a couple points about the underground set. That is the equivalent of the Valley set. So the Valley set in the core set is one that is kind of your random encounters. It gets 3 of them. 3 cards from that gets randomly shuffled into the path deck anytime you go to a non-pivotal location. The underground set is like the equivalent of that, but while you are underground. Well, we've chatted for a while about Legacy. I guess before... So what we are going to do is we're going to wrap up this episode of the podcast, and then we will be back next episode to chat with Davi. But we are not going to be... You're not going to have to wait the full 2 weeks as normal. We are going to be releasing the next episode next week, right, Andrew?
I believe so, yes.
Yep. So episode a week while we're doing the Gamefound. So tune in next week to hear from Davi. But before we go, I guess, does anybody have parting thoughts or other stuff they wanted to mention about Legacy of the Ancestors before we sign off today?
I don't think so. I was really enthralled by the entire conversation, so I enjoyed it quite a bit. So I'm excited. So I hope everyone else is too.
Yep, and hopefully, we kind of piqued your interest while keeping some mystery. We want to be very sensitive to. I know people, especially on the core set, because of the nature of this game as being very narrative and story driven. We want to be kind of sensitive about spoiling too much. So hopefully we struck a good balance for you all there. But thank you all so much for tuning in and hearing a bit about these expansions. And then join us next time to chat with Davi. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.